Hey everybody, it's the Commodore from the Clan of the Grey Wolf, and you are watching the weekly Wringer series here on clanofthegraywolf.com. And there is a lot to do this week. I have a funny feeling we are in for just one hell of an episode today. I think it's going to be great. But one of the reasons why is because we got to set up, I think it's a special episode because we've got to set up the question that will be used in the 100th episode of the Weekly Wringer, which is coming up next time, and something any of you that have been watching, whether you've been watching for 3 episodes, 1 episode, or all 100, and I know there's probably at least 3 of you out there that have been watching since the beginning of the series, this is one you're not going to want to miss. So next time, or I'm going to ask the question at the end of this particular episode that's going to be used in the 100th episode of the Weekly Wringer, so you're definitely going to want to see that one when it comes out, and think carefully about the question I'm going to ask. Anyway, so that means I funneled through all the submissions that you guys gave to me over the course of the last few weeks slash months, and have kind of come down to, I think, some of the ideas that I think are very good and will work well, and I hope to be able to make some of those happen, including the question which was indeed suggested by several of you in the community as well. So anyway, you're not going to want to miss that one next week, but we still got a big episode to do this week, which was obviously a very, very good topic to wrap up from last week. Also want to apologize for the lateness of this video. I don't know if you can hear in my voice, I'm still kind of stuffed up. I got a little sick over the weekend, which is normally my shooting time, my editing time, and instead I was just kind of sitting on the couch looking out the window longingly at things that could have been done, and I didn't do them because I was just sick. So I apologize for that, but I'm here, and despite the frog in my throat and the stuffiness of my nose, I am talking to you now. So hopefully that that will be good enough for you guys. My voice kind of ebbs and flows here, wanes and waxes. I have to apologize. I got to keep drinking lots of fluids just to keep myself, going today. Couldn't have picked a worse week to not have a voice, and that is because we have so much to talk about from last week's topic, which is really about embodying or occupying gender inside video game space, which I think was already a very interesting topic when I asked it, at least what I had in my head, which doesn't always translate 100% to what you guys are thinking about out there when I asked the question. But in this case, it turned out to be even better. There were a lot of other things that I hadn't considered, or ways that this question went that I certainly wasn't thinking about before. And so, as always, you, the community, kind of made the question to something that it wasn't necessarily designed to be. So I'll talk about what I thought it was going to be. I'll give my answer to where I was going with the question, but then I'll also kind of talk about some of the things that you guys brought up as well. Remember, as I always do here in the Weekly Wringer, I go through your suggestions to the question from last week. I offer up what I think are some of the best ideas, or some of the things that really struck me as particularly interesting. And then I will give you my own opinion, and then of course ask you the question for next week, which, as I mentioned before, you shouldn't miss, because it will be the question that I will answer during the 100th episode of the Weekly Wringer, which is sure to be a special episode. All right, let's get into things here. So there's a couple things that I always do here in the Weekly Wringer. The first one is that I always welcome our new community members, the folks that potentially have been watching for a while, or maybe silently lurking there out in the out in video land, watching us out there, but they haven't commented before. They are commenting for the first time. Or folks that just stumbled onto the series for the first time and said, hey, why not? What's another username and password? I'll just make a little comment here on the Weekly Wringer. In any case, remember, it is the comments, folks, that make that keep the show going. So I always like to highlight people that are new to the community and make sure we give them a nice hearty welcome as they step up to the plate and put some comments down. So this week we've got a couple of people. We've got a few people we need to welcome. Doom Waves, apparently a loyal viewer of the Echo Screen Live, which is the other show that I run here at Clan of the Grey Wolf, A big fan, but had never really checked out the Weekly Ringer, and did so perhaps because I made a suggestion on last week's Echo Screen Live to go and take a look at the current Weekly Ringer, which I thought to be particularly interesting. I don't know. I'm just putting the pieces together here, folks. That's all I'm doing. My job is just to... The old Commodore is always thinking. Wookiee Locks. What an awesome name, by the way. I think that's a really cool Wookiee Locks. It's an interesting little combination of characters there. A very insightful comment this week, I thought, as well, from Wookiee Locks as well. So just because you're a first-time commenter doesn't mean you can't really put something out there that's not only insightful, but can definitely be used in the show. So I thank all of you for making those kinds of contributions. They're what make everything so interesting to me. The next one I'm gonna have a really tough time with because it's like an amalgamation of all these different characters kind of in one place that makes it very difficult to pronounce. So I'm just going to try a different couple ways, and hopefully I'll hit the one that is the proper pronunciation. If I don't, I apologize in advance. Pranavmeno? Pranavmeno? I don't know. Pranavmeno? Am I missing something? Am I missing like a delineation here, like between, you know, nav, men? Oh, I don't know. I mean, I'm trying to think of. Generally, I'm pretty good at like dissecting license plates and like discerning meaning from those things. This one has just got me completely stumped. In any case, whatever the hell your name is, welcome to the Weekly Ringer community. Glad to have you on board, and I particularly like the icon that you had there with one of my favorite Sesame Street characters. Anyway, and then lastly, we also have DemMan8, which might be named, I don't know, as a response to this week's question about gender. I don't know. I'm not sure. But DemMan8, welcome to you as well. Welcome to all of you. Glad to have you on board here in the Weekly Ringer. As I say, comments are what keeps the show going, so I appreciate all of them. That being said, let's launch into the question from last week. I asked you if it was important to occupy a specific gender in video games. Now, before I get into some of the things that you guys said specifically, let me answer some of the kind of topics that were running through all the comments, some of the questions. I know a lot of times, you know, when I ask a question in the Weekly Ringer and things go really off the rails, I'll just kind of let it go off the rails. Sometimes I will actually go and write something and correct people and say, nah, this wasn't what I was thinking. Think more about this. I had a crisis moment a couple days into posting this where I kind of went, maybe I should have made myself a little more clear. Sometimes, folks, I write these questions and they're really, really clear to me. I know exactly what I'm thinking. I know exactly what I want you to say, or what I think you're going to say because I have answers in my mind. You never ask a question without thinking of answers, right? And then I put it up there and I kind of go, I'm a little unhappy with the wording there. But that's okay. That happens to the best of us. Even the Commodore is only but a human and makes mistakes from time to time. In any case, let's go to some of the prevailing thoughts here. Number one, and several of you talked about this, thank you, is that, you know, we definitely need to differentiate here between gender and sex. Now, is that important because you have to define one of those in order to answer the question? Or pick one or the other? I don't think so. Not because they're the same thing. They're not. As several of you said, sex is a biological determination, a physiological determination, and gender happens to be a manifestation culturally, a manifestation psychologically, and probably an interesting, as well, an interesting kind of dynamic between cultural and psychologically, and where those things kind of dialectically come up against each other. But lest we get too philosophical, let's just keep it at that. So there is a big difference between gender and sex. Several of you answered this question, I think, more firmly in the... Did I just say firmly in a conversation about gender? I totally did. Interesting choice of words. I don't know. Let me rewind. Some of you answered that question as if we were talking specifically about sex. Some of you answered the question as if we were talking specifically about gender. And some of you tried to bridge the gap because you're just wonderful people that want to make everyone happy. Not a wrong answer, folks. Not a wrong answer here on the Weekly Ringer. Whatever you think you need to be able to put out there to answer the question, the way you think I ask it is what you should do. I only ask that before you start writing, you just think about what you're writing. And I have to say, one of the best things that I have going here on the Weekly Ringer is that I have some very intelligent commenters. You guys are wonderful in that regard. So thank you. There's a difference between sex and gender, definitely. It probably affects the way that you can answer the question, and it probably changes the value of importance. However, I would say that neither of those particular designations, sex, gender, exists 100% in a vacuum, and they feed off of each other in interesting ways. This is not a women's studies course, nor is it a course on gender or biological, orientations, for example. And so I'm not going to go any deeper into that. I just want to say, though, those things feed into each other, and they're important, so that's why there really isn't a wrong answer. You could embody a particular perspective in sex, but it could really complicate the notion of what it means to embody a specific gender, and vice versa. And several of you pointed out those examples, which is why I'm going to talk about them. In any case, the second thing I wanted to mention is that many of you had the perspective this week, one I think is insightful, that this question probably changes depending on what kind of a game you're talking about. And not just maybe a different kind of a game, as in a narrative-driven game versus a purely play or fun-driven game. What kind of genre you're playing and how that might affect the embodiment of gender or sex. Also, many of you talked about the activities. Maybe directly or indirectly you mentioned the activities. What are you doing in the game space as a character, and how does that affect your perspective on sex and on gender? I think that is a very interesting question, and one that probably is fairly malleable if we're being honest. So, with that in mind, let's go on to the next thing that many of you talked about, which is that this begs the question of stereotyping, does it not? So we started to get into this. This is a part that I had no idea the question was going to go to. There are so many kind of tropes. There are so many different kinds of, and by tropes what I really mean are kind of repeated arguments that take hold. They become part of the discourse that gets used, reused, and sometimes even overused in video games. Several of you mentioned some of them, like the fact that female characters are often weak. And as a characteristic, they are weak, they are helpless, and they require saving. They are the damsel in distress in many ways. Some of those are sex constructions, some of those are gender constructions. We could talk about that at another time. The point is, they are in many cases stereotypical. Is this problematic, or is it not? Or does this make the game even more enjoyable? Does it perhaps shed light satirically on the value that we place as a society on gender and on sex? I don't know, but I think an argument compellingly can be made in both scenarios. But what I do think is that this question has kind of brought to the fore another question about what stereotypes really are and what kind of sexism might or might not be evident inside video games. A topic which we have actually covered here previously on with the Weekly Ringer. And so I hope you can kind of tune back and take a look at some of those if you're interested in that question. Now, those are the things that I found that were particularly interesting throughout the comments. Let me get into some of the specific things that you guys said. Nightwolf said, maybe embodying or occupying a particular gender is not always important, but sometimes it's necessary. As in, really, that the conversation we just had, right? So the idea of a story-driven game where you are given information about